My name is Rebecca Russell, and I'm going to be presenting on case study number 2, which is the presentation of George Rankin's biography. This biography is part of the Documenting the South project, which is a project with the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill that provides primary documents that relate to Southern history, literature, and culture. This particular diary is of George C. Rankin, who came of age during the Civil War, and he talks about his experience with slavery. He grew up with slaves in his home, and his experience growing up on a fluctuating border state. He grew up in Tennessee, and his religious awakening that led to him becoming a Southern Methodist preacher. And this diary could appeal to many researchers, researchers of the South, the Civil War, the impact of slavery on children, the impact in border states during the Civil War, and of course the majority of his life was spent as a Southern Methodist preacher, so Southern religion would also be very important. Things done well with this recording. It is a complete text. It's directly from the book, and it's all there. It's all transcribed. The page divisions are shown, so if you're trying to cite it, it's easy to cite the correct page. And the formatting is kept to a degree, so you can see that they capitalized everything correctly. They kept the spellings. They kept, things that were bolded. They tried to keep the formatting as, close as possible. And the text is searchable, so if you do a Control F, you can search the entire text. Images and illustrations are preserved to, a degree. They didn't preserve pages that were complete text. Later on, they will show illustrations and photographs, kind of just between the text that they transcribed. And they show the original cover, the original title pages, so there's that. So you kind of have an idea of what the book might have looked like. But it's not anything great. My personal preference is when I'm reading historic documents, I'd like to have at least a text that is somewhat historic looking. So not to get technical, but sans serif are, like this. This is probably Arial or something computer based. Serif is something with a little tab on it, like Times, Garamond, or Georgia, and that makes it look like you're reading something 100 years old, whereas this didn't exist then, nothing like it existed then, and so it's kind of odd to be reading. The formatting is difficult to read for length. It's very wide, it's very short, it's very web page-like, and the main problem is somewhere the coding got off, and so once you read about 100 pages, everything just starts narrowing down until we get to this point in the screen cap where things are 1 or 2 words. And you can't read that. I mean, arguably, if you were patient, you could read that, but nobody's patient enough to read 100 pages of single letter lines. So that makes the majority of the document unreadable. Slightly better example of basically that format is the Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg is, making massive amount of progress, but it's doing it by doing things very basic. It's mostly things with expired copyrights, and they're just transcribing the text. There's not even photographs in this. This isn't the same book, but as you can see, at least it's in a more appropriate font for me. And what they do is they make it readable for e-readers, so they have EPUB, they have Kindle, PDF, all different sorts of readers that make it easier to read on an e-reader. And while not everybody has an e-reader, it makes it easier to read it as a book as opposed to a web page, which is, easier to read in the long run. A much better example of the formatting, I was looking for an example in Google Books because even though it's Google, it's one of the best, transformative book to readable online processes. And I actually found the same book. So this is just a screen cap, but let me pull it open so I can show you a little bit. So this is the same book. It's got a different cover on it, and not the, illustration I would have picked as a cover. Probably the most dated, picture in the entire book. But it did keep all of the original title pages. And then once you get down a little bit, you can see that the text is readable, and since it's a direct copy, it looks like you're reading something from 1912, which makes it a lot easier to kind of put yourself in, the right, era of what you're going to be reading. As I just passed, these are links to all of the chapters, so it will take you to whatever chapter you're reading, and by this point in the other copy, you couldn't read anything because it was down to 1 word per line. And you're basically just reading a book. If you need to search something, that's also really helpful because it'll bring you all the options of what you can be reading with that keyword in it. And then, let's go back to the presentation. So that's a really good example. And then the only thing I found better than Google Books when it comes to taking a historic book and making it available online and keeping its, true book form, is archive.org, which is the Internet Archive, and they're kind of, working on things, but they're the most intuitive system, and it makes it feel like you're reading an actual book, which is super, super awesome, because it's the closest you can get without actually, going to that library and, taking it off the shelf. And in this case, the shelf would be in North Carolina, so that's a little bit out of reach. Now, I'm going to get this out of the way. The most frustrating part of finding this was that I looked to see who had digitized it, and it was digitized by Doc South, which is the same project. It was digitized by the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and the contributor was the University Library at the University of North Carolina, which means that this is the same project that is still posting this mess. And, once I found that out, I went to find anywhere on this page where it had been updated to link you to the better format, and there's nothing. Now, I'm looking, it does say 1998, it's kind of an original web page, but it's frustrating that they wouldn't put a big, bold link that says, please go to our newly formatted archive.org site. Because there is, a link somewhere on here to the archive.org site. So this is the home page. So accessibility-wise, it could be here. It's not anywhere on this page. If you click About, it does show you a link here. It's not an obvious link, it's just, right with the rest of their basic FAQ links. And so I'm going to give that a second to load, but this is their page on archive.org. It makes available all of their texts. But it's, when you've gotten it onto the best, possible user-friendly site, I don't know why you wouldn't make it more obvious that it's there. But, just to get back into what you can do with this version that makes it so much better, admittedly, it is like a book. This does not have searchable text, or, I'm sorry, it does not have a searchable table of contents. It's not links, so you can go straight to that chapter. It is searchable, though. So I looked at Methodist the last time, I looked at Methodist this time. And you can only do that in full screen, but full screen is kind of the best quote-unquote book format. And once you search the keyword, take the popular one, it will tag all of the places where it is. It'll also give you the whole paragraph so you know that what you're reading is relevant before you bother going to it, because let's see how long that takes to load. It takes a minute. But it is completely searchable, but you're getting the searchable function with the original text, and it just makes it so much easier to feel like you're reading a historic text when it looks like a historic text. And it's still got all of the same images that it did the first time. Let me get it to the front. Because this one even has, you're reading the book. That's the closest thing you have to having this book in your hands is the archive.org site. And it's linkable, it's shareable. I forgot to mention, Google Books has an ebook version you can download. And this has an ebook version. You can download multiple ebook versions. And so it's just, I think the most frustrating thing I found was that once I found the perfect version, or the close to perfect, it's not searchable by table of contents, but the close to perfect version, the website that you would navigate to this from is just not, it's not user friendly, and it's not making it obvious that this source is here and it's so good. And, you know, just you know, since we're looking at it, you can't read this. So, you know, once they see this, it's been up since 1998, they should, you know, find a way to progress to getting it to the user-friendly version. Or at least recoding this, because this is killing the ability to use this resource. But anyway, that's what I found in this set of resources. I really appreciate this. The Documenting the South project exists. I wish their main site made a bigger deal of the fact that they have basically a digital library of their sources that are incredibly readable, incredibly contextual, and I wish that was more obvious. Even Google, it was digitized by Google from the Harvard Library, so it's a completely different book that they digitized. But even this does a better job than this supposedly unique resource over at the University of North Carolina. So that just frustrated me a little bit. But overall, I'm glad I did find better resources for this particular book, especially since they were in two of my favorite resources in general. And I